Have you ever stopped to wonder why people cheer for leaders, even when they know those leaders are corrupt? Why the same crowd that demands justice will turn around and praise someone who's clearly breaking the rules? It's not just a political mystery, it's actually a psychological red flag, one that reveals more about us than the people in power. Think about Najib Razak, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia. He was accused of embezzling a jaw-dropping $4.5 billion from the country's sovereign wealth fund. And yet, many of his supporters stood by him. They called him a patriot. They argued he prioritized national development over what they dismissed as Western-style accountability. Or look at Italy, where Mussolini rose to power and was worshipped by millions, even as he dismantled democratic structures and centralized control. These weren't isolated incidents. We've seen this pattern over and over again, across countries, across generations. Leaders who don't hide their corruption, but flaunt it, are sometimes celebrated because of it. And this isn't just some dusty history lesson. Modern research from Harvard and the University of Chicago examined why voters in regions with a track record of electing corrupt politicians continue to do so. The findings were stunning. Around 40% of voters knowingly supported candidates with criminal records. Why? Many said something along the lines of, "Sometimes you need someone who's willing to break the rules. They get things done when no one else can." This video is about that exact phenomenon. Welcome to Philosophy Coded. Today, we're diving deep into Friedrich Nietzsche's controversial insights on the psychology behind this pattern. And this isn't just political commentary. The same dynamics explain why people stay in toxic relationships, worship celebrities, join cults, and idolize CEOs who bend the rules. So ask yourself, have you ever admired someone even though you knew they crossed ethical lines? Have you ever caught yourself looking past obvious character flaws just because someone seems strong, effective, or powerful? By the time we're done, you'll start seeing these patterns not just in society, but maybe even in your own decision-making. All right, let's set the stage. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff. Below you, chaos, uncertainty, a deep, dark unknown. According to Nietzsche, that feeling? That's not just fear. That's the core of being human. We live in a world without built-in meaning or structure, and it's terrifying. So, how do we cope? Nietzsche's answer is what he called the will to power. But don't mistake that for simply dominating others. It's deeper. It's the drive to master life itself, to shape your world, make sense of it, and impose your will upon it. In Nietzsche's words, every specific body strives to become master over all space and to extend its force. It's not some abstract theory. It's real psychology. Humans don't primarily chase happiness. We chase control, especially when things feel out of our hands. During economic collapse, social turmoil, or personal failure, when we feel powerless, we latch onto someone who seems like they aren't. Someone who looks like they've figured it out. Someone who offers us a piece of their power. Take political rallies. Thousands of people chanting a leader's name, even though they know that leader has skeletons in the closet. These aren't clueless followers. They're people who recognize that power and want to align themselves with it. Psychologist Jennifer Whitson ran a study back in 2008 that's super relevant here. She found that when people felt a loss of control, they were 40% more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. They also became more drawn to leaders who projected total certainty, even if that certainty meant bending the rules. Let's be honest. When's the last time you saw someone get results using questionable methods and felt a mix of discomfort and admiration. That inner contradiction? That's the key. Nietzsche believed that during times of instability, our moral standards shift, often without us even noticing. He put it like this: what is good? All that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. This leads us into one of Nietzsche's most debated ideas, his theory of moral psychology. He saw two competing moral systems shaping history: master morality and slave morality. Master morality values strength, success, dominance, excellence. Good is whatever demonstrates power. Bad is whatever reveals weakness. Slave morality, which Nietzsche believed arose among oppressed groups, flips that. It values humility, empathy, equality, and compassion. It calls the powerful evil and the weak good. Today, most modern societies say they operate under slave morality. We preach fairness, kindness, compassion. But under the surface, things get messy. We condemn exploitation in public, but binge-watch Succession and idolize bold tech CEOs on weekends. We're secretly fascinated by those who win at any cost. This isn't just hypocrisy, it's something deeper, something Nietzsche saw coming. Let's keep going. Think about Napoleon Bonaparte. Millions died because of his wars, yet he inspired deep devotion, not in spite of his conquests, but because of them. His followers didn't say, "Well, he's flawed but still a good man." No, they said, "He's a man of destiny, someone who plays by different rules." That mindset is still alive and well. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology looked at how people perceive power. The results? Even participants who claimed to prioritize equality rated dominant, power-hungry individuals as more charismatic and more effective as leaders. It's wild. We say we want leaders with integrity, but we often reward those who display boldness and control, even if they bend or break ethical norms along the way. Ever heard someone defend a corrupt leader by saying, "At least they're strong"? That's not a mistake. That's master morality peeking through, quietly influencing people who think they've embraced fairness and justice. Now, let's introduce one of Nietzsche's most eye-opening ideas: resentment. Not just resentment. It's deeper. Resentment is a kind of simmering bitterness that builds up when people feel powerless, humiliated, or overlooked. Nietzsche said, "Man would rather will nothingness than not will at all." In other words, people would rather destroy something, even themselves, than sit with the feeling of complete helplessness. That explains a lot. Let's say a working-class community is hit hard by economic decline. Factories close. Wages drop. People feel abandoned. Mainstream institutions don't seem to care. Then a leader shows up. Not just any leader, but one who acknowledges their pain and promises revenge against the people they believe caused it. Now imagine that same leader is clearly corrupt, uses sketchy tactics, makes shady deals. Why would people still support them? Because, psychologically, being seen and avenged feels more satisfying than abstract promises of reform. It's not just about policy, it's about vindication. Political scientist Catherine Kramer saw this firsthand in rural Wisconsin. Her fieldwork revealed that many people supported policies that weren't in their economic interest, just because those policies punished the urban elites they felt had ignored or looked down on them. The emotional reward of seeing your perceived enemies get what's coming to them can override the logic of what's good for you personally. This isn't irrational, it's human. We're wired for emotional meaning as much as we are for practical gain. Now ask yourself, have you ever rooted for someone not because they helped you, but because they hurt someone who hurt you. That impulse? It's common, and when it's exploited by a skilled leader, it becomes incredibly dangerous. Nietzsche had a lot to say about freedom, but not in the way we usually think about it. He said, "Freedom is the will to be responsible for ourselves." Think about that. Real freedom means taking full ownership of your choices, your actions, your life. No excuses, no one to blame. But that's hard. Really hard. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche described 3 spiritual transformations that people go through. The camel, obedient, burdened, carries what society tells it to carry. The lion, rebels, breaks free from old values. The child creates new values and meaning from within. Most people, Nietzsche believed, stay in the camel stage their entire lives. It's easier to carry external burdens than to confront the frightening responsibility of creating your own morality. Psychologist Erich Fromm later expanded on this idea in his book, Escape from Freedom. He argued that freedom can be terrifying. When people are forced to make complex ethical decisions on their own, many instinctively look for someone else to take the wheel. So let me ask you, when you faced a tough moral dilemma, one with no obvious right answer, did you make the call yourself? Or did you lean on someone else to decide for you? For most of us, deferring that responsibility feels relieving, comforting, safe. And that's exactly what many corrupt but confident leaders offer. They say, "I'll decide for you. I'll take the burden. I have the answers." And we let out a sigh of relief. It's this very relief that makes us vulnerable, especially during moments of crisis, when everything feels overwhelming and uncertain. Look at Germany during the chaotic Weimar Republic. Many citizens knew corruption was rampant, but they clung to strong leadership anyway. Why? Because it felt better to have someone steer the ship, anyone, than to float in ambiguity. So when a leader says something like, "Only I can fix this," it's tapping into a deep psychological need. A desire not just for safety, but for clarity, simplicity, and relief from moral weight. Nietzsche knew that this urge wasn't weakness, it was deeply human. But he also warned us, the moment we surrender that responsibility, we open the door to manipulation. Nietzsche once wrote, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." That one line cuts straight to the core of something we often take for granted, our deep need to belong. We're social creatures, always have been. Our ancestors didn't survive because they were the strongest individuals. They survived because they worked together in tight-knit groups. That tribal instinct is baked into our psychology. It's what Nietzsche called the herd instinct. Now, in many ways, this instinct is a good thing. It builds community, it creates shared meaning, and it allows people to function in groups. But like many instincts, it also has a dark side, especially when it's exploited by corrupt leaders. When someone in power manages to convince a group that they're the voice or the protector of that group, something strange happens. Criticizing the leader no longer feels like holding them accountable, it feels like betraying the tribe. Think about that. Once a leader becomes synonymous with the group's identity, dissent becomes disloyalty. It's no longer "he did something wrong," it's "you're attacking us." This is how our instinct for social cohesion can override our personal sense of right and wrong. The need to stay in the good graces of our group can become more powerful than our internal moral compass. Look at whistleblowers. People like Sharon Watkins, who warned Enron's leadership about financial fraud. She wasn't wrong. Everything she warned about came true. And yet, instead of being hailed as a hero, she faced threats to her career and was largely sidelined. Why? because she broke the unspoken rule of group loyalty. That instinct is even stronger when a leader deliberately stokes tribal identity, when they frame any criticism not as a critique of them, but as an attack on you, your community, your values, your identity. Suddenly, anyone who questions them isn't just wrong, they're the enemy. This strategy is intentional. It raises the social cost of speaking out so high that most people would rather stay silent, even when they see something clearly wrong. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt studied this behavior. He found that when people feel their sacred values are being attacked, things like patriotism, religion, cultural identity, they stop thinking like scientists and start thinking like theologians. Meaning, they defend the belief at all costs, no matter the evidence. Ask yourself, have you ever stayed quiet in a group, even though you disagreed with what was being said, just to avoid rocking the boat? That's the herd instinct in action. Now, let's step back to a bigger idea, one of Nietzsche's most famous and misunderstood declarations. God is dead. It's a bold statement. But Nietzsche wasn't celebrating. He wasn't gloating about atheism. He was mourning. What he meant was that, in modern society, belief in traditional religious authority was fading, and with it, the foundation for meaning, morality, and order. But here's the twist. Even though belief in God may be declining, Nietzsche argued that our need for something to worship remains as strong as ever. He warned, "Beware that a statue does not crush you." In other words, when we stop worshipping gods, we start worshipping people, leaders, celebrities, visionaries, great men who seem to live above the rules. Just look at how we talk about certain public figures. She's playing 4D chess. He's a genius, 10 steps ahead of everyone. They see the world differently. They're not like us. These aren't just compliments. They're myths, and they create a kind of untouchable aura. When someone's seen as a visionary or a savior, their flaws don't just get forgiven. They get rebranded as signs of greatness. Take Vladimir Putin. Despite vast evidence of corruption and unimaginable personal wealth, many of his supporters view those things as proof of his strength. His lavish lifestyle isn't seen as greedy. It's interpreted as a symbol of national pride and power. It's not just a personality cult. It's psychology in action. When we mythologize leaders, we stop judging them as regular people. We don't ask, is this behavior acceptable? We ask, what does it mean that he did this? And the answer is almost always twisted into something positive. Psychologist Dan McAdams uncovered something powerful in his research. People who deeply admire controversial leaders often weave those figures into their own identity stories. That means if the leader is criticized, it doesn't just feel like someone is attacking a politician, it feels like they're attacking you. And that makes it almost impossible to let go, even when the facts are undeniable. So take a second and reflect. Is there a leader, a celebrity, a public figure whose flaws you constantly excuse? Do you find yourself defending them, even when you wouldn't tolerate the same behavior from anyone else? It's not about shame. It's about awareness. Because once we understand the pull of idol worship, we can start resisting it. We can start seeing leaders as human beings, not mythic figures, and that's a crucial step toward keeping power in check. Let's dive deeper. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche introduces two powerful symbols, two kinds of people that represent very different paths in life. The Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Superman, and the Last Man. The Übermensch is Nietzsche's ideal, someone who confronts life directly, takes responsibility for their choices, and creates their own values. They don't follow conventional morality. They build something new, something personal, something earned. Then there's the last man, just wants to be comfortable, safe, undisturbed. Nietzsche describes them like this: they have left the regions where it was hard to live, for one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs against him, for one needs warmth. This idea might seem poetic or symbolic, but it's actually incredibly relevant to the way we choose leaders today. We often say we want bold, visionary leadership, but when it really comes down to it, many people support the leader who promises comfort, who promises they'll make things simple, who says, "You don't need to change, I'll take care of it." That's exactly what makes us vulnerable. Think about the FIFA corruption scandal. Football fans across the globe knew there were shady dealings, bribery, money laundering, power grabs, and yet millions continued to support the leadership. Why? Because they delivered. Big tournaments, big moments, national pride. They gave people the experience they wanted without forcing them to think about how the sausage was made. It's not apathy, it's psychology. Now picture two political speeches. One leader says, "The problems we face are complicated. They'll require tough decisions and sacrifice from all of us." The other says, "I alone can fix this. You won't have to sacrifice a thing." Which one gets more applause? The answer's been consistent across history and across cultures. During times of uncertainty, economic crises, cultural shifts, rising inequality, people overwhelmingly support the leader who promises simplicity over complexity, certainty over honesty, even when they know the simple solutions are probably fake. Political scientists have studied this effect for decades. They found that under stress, whether financial, cultural, or psychological, voters gravitate towards strongman figures who offer clear, confident answers, even if those answers are oversimplified or downright false. Now, stop for a moment and ask yourself, what do you want from your leaders? What makes you feel reassured? Is it nuance, or is it certainty? That's not a rhetorical question. It's one that matters, because here's the truth: recognizing our desire for easy answers is the first step in guarding ourselves against those who would exploit it. The psychological forces we've talked about, resentment, the herd instinct, idol worship, the craving for simplicity, aren't flaws. They're part of what it means to be human. But that doesn't mean we're stuck. Some communities and nations have learned to push back. Look at post-apartheid South Africa. After decades of brutal racial oppression, the country was primed for anger, vengeance, and revenge politics, the perfect conditions for a strongman to take over. But under Nelson Mandela, South Africa took a different path. Instead of revenge, they pursued reconciliation. Mandela's Truth and Reconciliation Commission gave people space to speak, to be heard, and to confront the past without repeating it. That took incredible restraint and incredible courage. The same emotional pressure that usually gets funneled into tear it all down was redirected into healing. Or take Iceland, right after the 2008 financial crash. When bankers and politicians were exposed for massive corruption, citizens didn't just complain. They surrounded Parliament with pots and pans in what became known as the kitchenware revolution. They forced resignations, prosecuted corrupt bankers, and even rewrote parts of their constitution with citizen participation. That kind of public action breaks the usual psychological cycle. Instead of surrendering power to a fixer, the people reclaimed it for themselves. There's a name for that: collective efficacy. It's the belief that we, together, can change our circumstances. It's the direct opposite of helplessness, and it's kryptonite to corrupt leadership. And here's the kicker: these examples didn't avoid the psychological forces Nietzsche described. They acknowledged them. They understood how seductive power, simplicity, and vengeance can be, and they built structures to redirect that energy. So the question now becomes personal. What kind of community do you live in? Does it amplify your critical thinking, or does it reward blind loyalty and emotional shortcuts? Do you have spaces, friend groups, workplaces, institutions, where disagreement is welcomed, not punished, where complexity isn't treated like weakness, because change doesn't start with them. It starts with us. Let's bring it all home. Everything we've talked about, our longing for strong leaders, our vulnerability to hero worship, the herd instinct, our craving for comfort and certainty, it's not just about society out there. It's about us in here. Nietzsche didn't just diagnose our collective psychological weaknesses. He also offered a path forward. And that path starts with a challenge. Become who you are. That might sound like a motivational quote you'd see on a coffee mug, but Nietzsche meant it much more radically. He was calling us to stop borrowing values from others, politicians, ideologies, religions, and start creating values for ourselves. He wasn't saying do whatever you want. He was saying, look inside, confront the raw, often uncomfortable truth about what drives you, and take full responsibility for shaping your own path. There's a concept Nietzsche often came back to, amor fati, the love of fate. It means embracing life as it is. Not wishing things were easier, not waiting for someone to save you, but facing life's chaos head-on and saying, yes, even this, I will make something from it. That's a powerful contrast to the kind of thinking that makes us idolize corrupt leaders. Because when we look to them for strength, for meaning, for moral direction, we're outsourcing something that should be ours. And look, this isn't easy. Self-reflection rarely is. Ask yourself honestly, why do I support the leaders I support? Is it because I've thought deeply about their values and actions, or because they give me something I want, a sense of strength, a scapegoat, someone to blame, someone to fix it for me? That's not an accusation. It's an invitation to shift from being a passive consumer of leadership to an active participant in the moral life of your community. Because here's the truth, Nietzsche understood better than most, the greatest danger isn't corrupt leaders, it's the unchecked loyalty that lets them thrive. The moment we stop questioning, the moment we stop thinking critically, the moment we trade complexity for slogans, that's when real corruption takes root. And that's when we lose not just good leadership, but a piece of our freedom. But the good news, we're not doomed to repeat the same patterns. Around the world, there are people and communities that have figured out how to push back by staying curious, staying connected, and staying awake. Take the women of Polo County in Liberia. After living through years of corrupt rule and tribal division, they didn't wait for change to come from above. They formed cross-tribal councils, built new systems of accountability, and helped hold their leaders to higher standards. What did they do differently? They stopped seeing each other as us versus them and started seeing each other as people. They refused to let tribalism, or the leaders who manipulated it, define their future. They channeled Nietzsche's philosophy into something practical: collective responsibility, integrity, and courage. That's what rising above our psychological vulnerabilities looks like. Not denial, not perfection, just awareness, honesty, and deliberate action. Because ultimately, Nietzsche didn't write for the masses. He wrote for you. The individual, the person willing to look in the mirror and ask the hard questions. What am I avoiding? What am I clinging to out of fear? What do I really believe? If you've made it this far in the video, you're already doing something rare. You're thinking critically about things most people never question. And that's the first step toward transformation. Not just in how we choose our leaders, but in how we lead ourselves. So let me ask you, Which of these psychological forces, power worship, resentment, the herd instinct, the comfort of the last man, do you see most clearly in your life, in your community, in your nation? Drop a comment, start a conversation. Because the more aware we become of these forces, the less power they have over us. And hey, if this video sparked something in you, share it. Not for the views, but because these are the conversations we need right now. The kind that push us past passive consumption and into conscious participation. Remember, the most dangerous power we can give any leader is the power to remain unquestioned. Until next time, stay curious, stay honest, and above all,